series of projects that was founded by Aki Tami, who is an indigenous artist who is based in Bombay, and it started as a physical library where Aki collected works by women from all over the region, so from Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Pakistan, and she would host like reading events, book launches, zine making workshops, and the whole purpose of the space and the events was to celebrate female excellence and ingenuity. When we brought so the Goethe Institute and Her Story Foundation collaborated on hosting a sister library event in Dhaka in 2020, just before the pandemic. And so Aki came and she brought 100 books with her for 5 days. And the Goethe Institute hosted the books in their library. We colored a whole shelf pink, and the books were there, and we had a couple of readings, A Sultana's Dream, and I think the Hanare Malam. And it was so good that we didn't want to discontinue after Aki left after a week. So with her like blessing, we just continued reading in this circle. And we read all sorts of things, but only women. And we never really read a whole book. So it's not a traditional book club in that sense, because we only have like this hour and a half. It's about once or twice a month maximum. And we read like either selected works by a woman or selected parts of a work. And the elder sister guides the reading. So it's she who chooses the parts that we read. Yeah, and we've been reading for about 2 years. As of this year, we have a physical space. It's a pink shelf, again, in the new Goethe Institute, which is on Panthapat. And there we collect works by women, and we really try to collect works by local authors and creatives, and some of them are like, self-published or very limited editions. So something that we are proud of is last month we collected a very limited edition by Sadia Sharmeen, who's an architect and researcher. And these are for view only in the library, but they're really, really lovely work from her experiences in Coral, and also I think there's another one which is a coloring book drawn by children of their memories of Dhaka, but also their some of them are memories and some of them are their imagined monuments of Dhaka. So things that they've heard exist but have never seen. Like a lot of them drew the parliament, even though they never went to it, but they'd seen pictures and they were told about it. So it's a coloring book that she produced with the kids. To become a member of that library, all you have to do is like make an appointment with the librarian and then show up at the time you set with him. And I think until the end of the month it's free, and then afterwards it's 1,000 baht per month. Sorry, per year. So today we are reading 2 poets from Palestine, and our elder sister is Raisha Sajjad. And the reason that we chose this topic is because the last reading we did was dedicated to Ukraine, because I'm Ukrainian, and the war really impacted me and still continues to. But I think like being here and experiencing the war, I've also like experienced people's reaction, which is very, very justified, that there has been a lot of hypocrisy by the West in its treatment of Palestine and its response to the Ukrainian war. And I wanted, I wanted to kind of share this space, and also, go through the works of Palestinian authors, and I think also like seek solace in their experience for myself personally, but also to honor the response that I've heard here. And the reason that I've invited you, Raisha, is because of your experience there. So you've had firsthand experience living there and working with people there. So you think you can offer insight that other people may not have had the experience too. So thank you for saying yes to this and doing this, making time. And please take it away.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Kat. I really appreciate it. Obviously, this is my first time participating in the Sister Library, so a big thank you to Kat, to her story, and to the Goethe Institute for putting this together. I'm looking forward to the poems and hopefully some good discussions afterwards as well. You mentioned, Kat, like now is quite a pertinent time, I think, to have this reading, given that sort of Palestine has been making headlines recently. There's been a flare up of conflict around about Al-Aqsa. I know Gaza was bombed recently again, as it seems to be bombed every Ramadan. And there's been sort of conflict and protests in occupied territories as well as the West Bank as well. So this is a very relevant time, I think, to look at some Palestinian, to look at literature from Palestine by Palestinians. But as you highlighted, conflict isn't, the Palestinians are quite familiar with conflict and they've been living with it for decades, but we do have active conflict in quite a few other countries around the world. And, I think this is a good reminder that these things are happening and that these discussions are important. Just a little bit of background on me. I studied at SOAS, which is in London, and I studied Arabic and development studies. And that sort of took me to various parts of the Middle East where I lived and worked. I was fortunate to get to spend some time in Palestine as well, in the West Bank. I got to meet some lovely families there and sort of speak to them and hear about their reality of sort of living under occupation. And it was hard. It was hard sort of hearing some of the things that they had to go through. But even for myself as an individual with a British passport, it was difficult just to navigate around Palestine, around Israeli territories as well. I had to deal with like a lot of detention. I got detained a bunch of times. There was sort of a lot of restriction. And if I faced sort of that level of difficulty, I can only imagine how difficult it is for the people who live there, and who have lived there for years. So some of the poems today, we're reading poems by Tuqan and Naomi Shihab Nye. Both of them, I think, sort of really capture the spirit of resistance. Some of Tuqan's poetry is a little bit more on the heavier side. So just a bit of a warning to everyone today. I think she touches on, there's quite a lot of vivid imagery around warfare, but there's also some triggering content in there. I think at one point she talks about rape as well. So I think it's important to mention that before we continue. But both I think are fantastic poets. Some of the verses are hard to hear, but important to listen to. We have 2 poems by each of the poets today, and then a third poem at the end by Nye, which isn't necessarily about Palestine. It's a little bit closer to home. It's based on a turtle shrine here in Bangladesh, in Chittagong. And I thought it would be a nice way to kind of end the reading today. So if we can start off with some introductions on the poets, I think that would be lovely. We've got Fadwa Tuqan, who was born in 1917. She passed away in 2012. She is quite a prolific Palestinian poet and quite sort of well-known. amongst sort of much of the Arabic speaking world. She's published, I think, 8 poetry collections, and much of it touches on resistance, on identity, on sort of like a profound desire to return home, to live with dignity. There's a lot of nationalism and a lot of sort of personifying Palestine and the land that Tuqan is indigenous to. Tuqan, a lot of her poetry, she writes this during periods of really intense conflict in Palestine. So parts of it were written during the 6-Day War, during the Second Intifada. There are 2 intifadas, the second intifada being an uprising or a revolution, the second which was quite a bloody, violent ordeal. So these were kind of like the context in which Tuqan was writing, and I think it definitely reflects in her work. By contrast, you also have Naomi Shihab Nye, who was born, I believe, and raised in the US, but also spent some time in the West Bank. And she touches on some of the complexities of identity and culture, and has, by contrast, a kind of a more light-hearted approach to the Palestinian situation, but a definite sense of urgency throughout her writing. And I think it'd be interesting to sort of contrast the 2 together. The first poem we'll be doing is called Hamza by Tuqan. Tuqan had 2 brothers, by the way, both of whom passed away during sort of that conflict period. And although I haven't read this for certain, but I imagine this poem probably has something to do with her brother's death. It seems to sort of showcase the ordinary Palestinian man and the reality of his time in Palestine. So Kat, can I just ask, do you want me to go ahead with the reading, or does anyone else want to sort of participate?
It would be great if you started the first one, and then we can open it up for others to read.
Okay, all right. So starting off with Hamza. This is by Tuqan. So Hamza was just an ordinary man, like others in my hometown who would work with only their hands for bread. When I met him the other day, this land was wearing a cloak of mourning. In windless silence, and I felt defeated. For Hamza, the ordinary said, "My sister, our land has a throbbing heart. It doesn't cease to beat, and it endures the unendurable. It keeps the secrets of the hills and the wombs. This land is sprouting with spikes and palms, and also the land that gives birth to a freedom fighter. This land, my sister, is a woman." Days rolled by, and I saw Hamza nowhere. Yet I felt the belly of the land was heaving in pain. Hamza, 65, weighs heavy like a rock on his own back. "Burn, burn his house," a command screamed, "and tie his son in a cell." The military ruler of our town later explained it was necessary for law and order. That is, for love and peace. Armed soldiers garroted his house. The serpent's coil came in full circle. The bang at the door was but an order. "Evacuate, damn it." And as generous as they were with time, say, "In an hour, yes." Hamza opened the window, face to face with the sun blazing outside. He cried, "In this house, my children and I will live and die for Palestine." Hamza's voice echoed clean across the bleeding silence of the town. An hour later, impeccably, the house came crumbling down. The rooms were blown to pieces in the sky, and the bricks and stones all burst forth, burying the dreams and the memories of a lifetime of labor and tears and some happy moments. Yesterday I saw Hamza walking down the street in our town, Hamza the ordinary man as he always was, always secure in his determination. And that's that. again, I really like this poem because I really like the imagery around it. It's easy to sort of envision. I mean, so one of the towns that I worked in Palestine, one of the towns that I visited actually, it was demolished, I want to say about 8 months ago. And I remember one of my friends posted a video. She'd also been there. She posted a video, and in that video, there was a cat sort of rummaging through the rubble, looking for her kittens. And I was told afterwards she did find those kittens, so that's good. But when I read this poem, I sort of went back to that image and to just how, I mean, I'm not Palestinian. And I remember how devastating it was to watch that, because that was a place that, you know, I once walked down. That was a town that I once saw fully intact. Those were people that I interacted with, and it was flattened. It was gone in an instant. And it wasn't just buildings, it was sort of history. It was a sort of sad demise to, you know, to a group of people who were so steadfast in their determination to preserve those buildings and all the history that came with it. And I remember how harrowing it was to watch. And again, this is from someone who isn't Palestinian. So again, I can't imagine how much more, you know, how disheartening it is for people who are from Palestine to witness these things on a day-to-day basis. And for me, that this poem captured that essence. The ordinary Palestinian man and his silent but steadfast determination to continue to exist. And to exist with dignity as much as possible. But yes, so this one, as I was saying a little bit earlier, this one's a little bit heavier than the earlier poem that we looked at, but also sort of quite profound in terms of some of the sentiment that I imagine and some of the frustration, particularly, that a lot of Palestinians must feel. In fact, a lot of anyone dealing with conflict or occupation. This one's called Face Lost in the Wilderness. And if I do cut out Kat, I think you've got a copy of this as well. If you know, I'm conscious of the fact that I'm having quite a few technical issues today, but hopefully we can continue even if I do get disconnected. Okay, Face Lost in the Wilderness by Tuqan. Do not fill postcards with memories between my heart and the luxury of passion. Ropes of fire, blaze following blossoms with poison and flame. No, don't ask me to remember. Love's memory is dark, the dream clouded. Love is a lost phantom in a wilderness night. Friend, the night has slain the moon. In the mirror of my heart, you can find no shelter, only my country's disfigured face, her face lovely and mutilated, her precious face. How did the world revolve this way? Our love was young. Did it grow in this horror? In the night of defeat, black waters covered my land, blood on the walls was the only bouquet. I hallucinated, open your breast. Open your mother's breast for an embrace. Priceless are the offerings. The jungle beast was toasting in the tavern of crime. Winds of misfortune howled in the four corners. He was with me that day. I didn't realize in the morning would remove him. Our smiles cheated sorrow as I raved, beloved stranger, why did my country become a gateway to hell? Since when are the apples bitter? When did moonlight stop bathing orchards? My people used to plant fields and love life. Joyfully they dipped their bread in oil. Fruits and flowers tinted the land with magnificent hues. Will the seasons ever again give their gifts to my people? Sorrow, Jerusalem's night is silence and smoke. They imposed a curfew. Now nothing beats in the heart of the city but their bloodied heels, under which Jerusalem trembles like a raped girl. Two shadows from a balcony stared down at the city's night. In the corner, a suitcase of clothes from the Holy Land. His blue eyes stretched like a mystical lover. On and on I ranted. Our love. Why did God abandon my country, imprisoning light, leaving us in seas of darkness? The world was a mythical dragon standing at her gate. Who will ever solve this mystery? Beloved, the secret of these words. Now 20 moons have passed. 20 moons and my life continues. Your absence too continues. Only one memory remaining, the face of my stricken country filling my heart. And my life continues. The wind merges with me, my people, on the terrible road of rocks and thorns. But behind the river, dark forests of spears sway and swell. The roaring storm unravels mystery, giving to dragons silence and the power of word. A rush and a din, flames and sparks lighting the road. One group after another falls embracing in one lofty death. The night, no matter how long, will continue to give birth to star after star in my life, and that's the end of the poem. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to say regarding the poem? Any thoughts? Tuqan wrote this whilst I believe Palestine was under siege. I believe this was when the West Bank was under siege as well. Like much of her poetry, this also talks about resistance. So let me just gather my thoughts here. I believe, so this was whilst Palestine was under siege, and I believe this was roughly about the time of the Six-Day War, which was in 1967, which was the third of the Arab-Israeli wars. And this is when the West Bank and the Sinai Peninsula. I think I have my dates correct, but I think this is when she wrote the frustrating it must have been for her to sort of witness these things take place in her country. Yeah, and I think it definitely shows. You get a sense of how heavy this conflict is weighing on her. But that's it from Tuqan.
I think Sami has something to raise your hand. Sami Mata?
Thank you. First of all, the reading was beautiful. Beautiful. I have to, okay, I'll put my hand down later on. I would like to say, like, it just connects my memory with 1971. And in 1967, when it happened, we were in Bangladesh. I was in Bangladesh. It's been 30 years that I'm living in UK. And I remember the ordinary people, how they felt about it. And well, we didn't know then that in 69, there would be kind of, I mean, I was the student of Dhaka University. And then it's all these, I mean, about 71 that we all had been working really hard and non-cooperation movement and stuff, and after that the preparation for 1971. So whenever I read those kind of poems or short story, I mean, it's immediately, it becomes really vivid in my memory, and I can straight away connect that. It is something like that I have witnessed, and I thought this is the time when people kind of lose their faith, or they question their faith. This is why, in the poem I really liked, there are two or three lines. One of the striking line is that, like, why God has abandoned our country. So you feel like, we all are God's creation. Why God is not kind of looking at us when this injustice is happening. Another line that I thought, like, when we are in misery, when we are in trouble and we have a fear for our life, the question is that, like, would there be still love that is growing? I think there was a line like that, like in the horror, um, can love grow?
Yeah.
So it is very basic, but it doesn't really carry that much of a meaning until or unless you have been through it, or you can really imagine that.
Mm.
This poem is so powerful. Thank
Yeah.
you for reading it to us, Raisa.
Well, thank you for having me. And I agree. It is. I mean, it's in many ways it's simple, and in many ways it's incredibly complex. But without a doubt, it is powerful, and I think it resonates with anyone who's experienced any kind of hardship. You know, in whatever form. And you really get a sense of sort of what she must have felt. But yeah, no, thank you for that input. If does anyone else have anything to say? Sorry, I can't see everyone's screen, so I can't see if someone's put their hand up. But um, if not, we can crack on with Naomi Shihab Nye, who I believe you've had the privilege of meeting. Oh no, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Yes, it is. So exciting. I mean, when I was in Bangladesh, I can't claim that I'm a known poet, but I was a budding poet at the time, really very young. And Naomi came to visit Bangladesh. It was during the East Pakistan time. And things were organized by the embassy that she could meet local poets. And not many poets who are women are writing. So I mean, maybe I just filled in a box. So I could join in and I could read my poem. She actually came, it was her night, and all the prominent poets, including Rafiq Azad, Asad Chaudhry, Fazl Shahabuddin, Ali Ahsan, and of course Nurul Huda, all of them. Now, probably those people are aware of Bengali literature from Bangladesh. They would recognize them by name. And there I was, and Ruby Rahman was there, and Jorina Akhtar. We three female poets were there.
Yeah.
So Naomi was very young then. I think actually only on the other day I figured out that she and I actually kind of similar age now. But she was already very known. So immediately we had a bonding. And in those few sessions that she attended in Bangladesh, after the session or before the session, we had we talked about Bangladesh. We had a bonding. But honestly, all these years were gone past. Only I have got the connection with Dr. Caroline Wright. She's an eminent poet from USA. And Naomi, these two people were really kind of, I would say that they know me personally, but I lost contact with Naomi. It is you guys. When I saw the email, and before, in a few days ago, I shared in my social media about the poetry night, that American and Bangla poet night, and where we have got the huge group, and Naomi was there. And what I found out that there is a few shots with her and with one of my other poet friend called Tridip Dostidar. He was of our age. And when I saw this email, I thought I should share it with Kate. So I sent it, and here I am. And I made connection with Naomi. She's in the Facebook, and she just said, wow.
I think Kat also might have reached out to her as well and to invite her to participate today, but unfortunately she had another Zoom call, I believe. But how wonderful is it that she's that available? Because from the research that I've done on her, I wasn't familiar with her poetry until before this session, and I read up on some of the stuff that she's written. And this lady has received so many awards.
Absolutely.
And like, what a prolific artist, what a prolific poet, and what a woman of great standing, I imagine. But I think it's wonderful that despite just an enormous list of accolades, awards, and achievements, that she responded, Kat. And I think had she not had that other meeting, she might have been here today. And I think that's wonderful.
I think so.
And what a great platform to bring people together like this, to reunite two poets and two friends many years later.
Absolutely, absolutely, my pleasure.
Unfortunately, she's not here, but I'm sure we'll feel her presence today. We'll celebrate her writing. But we've got 3 poems actually by Naomi today, some of which I imagine you're familiar with.
Maybe not, but I'm up for it.
Yeah. Okay. But so there's some of the poems that we've done so far by Fadwa Tuqan. They've been quite heavy, and you really get a sense of some of the struggles of warfare. By contrast, Naomi, she obviously does talk about Palestine and Palestinian identity, but she takes a very different approach. Naomi was born in Missouri, which is, funnily enough, where my dad went to study. Her father was a Palestinian refugee, and her mother was, I believe, of American and German descent. And she spent her sort of teenage years in both Jerusalem and Texas. And I imagine those are quite formative years. You're quite impressionable at that age. And the experience sort of really opened her eyes to the difference. I want to say difference, but also it's like same but difference of culture, like the nature of culture, being that we have quite different practices across the world, but also in examining culture and cultural practices, you realize that there is a lot of sameness in it as well. That we're different, but in many ways very much the same. And you get this, you get the essence of that in her poems. After the attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001, Nye became quite active for the voice of Arab Americans. She spoke out against terrorism and equally against prejudice as well, both of which were quite salient, I imagine, during that period. And she's written many volumes of poetry. She's also written books for children, and just like an enormous amount of work. So the first poem that we have today is called Different Ways to Pray, and I thought this was quite wonderful. One of the things that really left a mark on me from my time in Jerusalem was how it was sort of the center of all Abrahamic religions. And in one strip, you sort of had the Church of Nativity, the Western Wall, as well as Al-Aqsa Mosque. And when you're there, you feel this overwhelming sense of passion that everyone else around you feels, because they too, I imagine, are overwhelmed, to be in the Holy Land, to see in front of them these structures, these huge, enormous kind of structures that have such significance in history, and to be there, to see it in front, to walk down the very streets that the Bible says Jesus walked down, I imagine is an overwhelming sensation. And I like I like that this poem is about, you know, sort of the different ways that people pray, and you see that like when I was in Jerusalem. So when you walk down that strip, you see sort of how the Muslims prayed, how the Jews prayed, and how the Christians prayed, and they might have been slightly different in kind of like their movements or their rituals, but ultimately, I imagine we're all praying for the same things. You know, like as individuals, as humans, I imagine we all want the same thing. So this is Different Ways to Pray by Naomi Shihab Nye. There was a method of kneeling, a fine method. If you lived in a country where stones were smooth, the women dreamed wistfully of bleached courtyards, hidden corners where knee fit rock. Their prayers were weathered rib bones, small calcium words uttered in sequence, as if the shedding of syllables could somehow fuse them to the sky. There were the men who had been shepherds so long they walked like sheep. Under the olive trees, they raised their arms. Hear us, we have pain on earth. We have so much pain, there is no place to store it. But the olives bobbed peacefully in fragrant buckets of vinegar and thyme. At night, the men ate heartily, flatbread and white cheese, and were happy in spite of the pain, because there was also happiness. Some prized the pilgrimage, wrapping themselves in new white linen to ride the buses across the miles of vacant sand. When they arrived at Mecca, they would circle the holy places on foot many times. They would bend to kiss the earth and return, their faces lean, housing mystery. While for certain cousins and grandmothers, the pilgrimage occurred daily, logging water from the spring or balancing the baskets of grapes. These were the ones present at births, humming quietly to perspiring mothers, the ones stitching intricate needlework into children's dresses, and forgetting how easily children soil their clothes. There were those who didn't care about praying. The young ones, the ones who had been to America, they told the old ones, "You're wasting your time." Time? The old ones prayed for the young ones. They prayed for Allah to mend their brains, for the twig and the round moon, to speak suddenly in a commanding tone. And occasionally, there would be one who did none of this. The old man Fauzi, for example, Fauzi the fool, who beat everyone at dominoes, insisted he spoke with God as he spoke to goats, and he was famous for his laugh. And that's it. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to share, or any thoughts on the poem? A clap emoji. So what I like, you see my notes here as well. What I like about Shihab Nye is that it's quite lighthearted, and I touched on this earlier, but it brings home to readers just how same but different people are. And a wonderful thing I think about her poetry is it sort of captures the essence of everyday life. Just some of the magic in the ordinary, when she talks about sort of olives bopping in brine, or the pilgrimage of someone lugging water back and forth from a well. You see sort of the spectacular and the everyday, and I think that's quite lovely. And I think in her own words as well, during an interview, I'll read this out to everyone. In her own words, I think Nye once mentioned that I have always loved the gaps and the spaces between things as much as the things themselves. Like I love staring and pondering and mulling and puttering. You know, I love the times when someone says, the things that people say, or when something is running late, that there's a rich possibility in noticing more in the meantime. And she says that poetry calls us to pause and to kind of reflect and to kind of look around and sometimes maybe indulge in a little introspection. Because when we don't pause, there is so much that we kind of overlook, and quite often we overlook just the richness and the abundance around us. And I like the fact that she sort of talks about some of these things. I think it's quite wonderful. The next poem that we have is called Jerusalem. And I shall ask once again, does anyone else want to take a stab at reading this? Otherwise, I will crack on. No, I can't see anyone. Right, so Jerusalem. Let's be the same wound if we must bleed. Let's fight side by side, even if the enemy is ourselves. I am yours and you are mine. This isn't Naomi, by the way. This is the opening to her poem. I'm not interested in who suffered the most. I'm interested in people getting over it. Once, when my father was a boy, a stone hit him on the head. Hair would never grow there. Our fingers found the tender spot and its riddle. The boy who has fallen stands up. A bucket of pears in his mother's doorway welcomes him home. The pears are not crying. Later, his friend who threw the stone says that he was aiming at a bird, and my father starts growing wings. Each carries a tender spot, something our lives forgot to give us. A man builds a house and says, I am native now. A woman speaks to a tree in a place of her sun, and olives come. A child's poem says, I don't like wars. They end up with monuments. He's painting a bird with wings, wide enough to cover 2 roofs at once. Why are we so monumentally slow? Soldiers stalk a pharmacy, big guns, little pills. If you tilt your head just slightly, it's ridiculous. There's a place in my brain where hate won't grow. I touch its riddle, wind and seeds, and something pokes us as we sleep. It's late, but everything comes next. And that's the end. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Naomi's father was Palestinian, but in quite a few of her poems, she talks about how he was in her recognizing her own identity and her constructing her own identity as sort of an Arab American. And he features in a lot of her poems, and he features in quite beautiful ways. She talks about sort of how delicate his hands are when he's sort of handling dates. She talks about him as a figure of protection. Here, I believe, where she talks about him trying to protect their home. And it's very poignant. It's very poignant, sort of reading her poems and seeing her relationship with her father, seeing a relationship with a father who has been displaced, or a father who I imagine is quite attached to this homeland, and how that in turn has affected her. Affected her as a person with two nationalities, who's made from 2 lands. And yeah, it's quite poignant, and I quite like that about this poem. The final poem that we have for today is a little further off from Palestine. It's based, I imagine, from Naomi's visit to Bangladesh, where you guys met. And it's called A Turtle Shrine near Chittagong. Now, for those who don't know, I came to learn this very recently myself, but there is actually a turtle shrine in Chittagong. I crossed on my way to a wedding once, and I thought it was really bizarre. And someone told me it's a shrine that has all of these turtles living in it, and people go to pay their respects. But I looked into it, and there's quite an interesting history behind it. It's called the Shrine of Bayezid Bostami, who was a famous Persian Sufi, who I believe, or it is believed, made his way to Bangladesh at one point. And I think what happened was the turtles that exist there today are supposed to be spirits that of people who weren't so nice and then were sort of destined to become these turtles and live in that shrine. But none of the turtles live there. They're actually an endangered species now, and no one is allowed to remove any of the turtles. So in a convoluted way, that shrine is actually preserving and protecting that species. So good for them. Yes, so this is Naomi Shihab Nye's A Turtle Shrine near Chittagong. Humps of shell emerge from dark water. Believers toss hunks of bread, hoping that the fat reptilian heads will loom forth from the murk and eat, meaning you have been heard. I stood breathing the stench of mud and rotten dough and could not feel encouraged. Climbed the pilgrim hill where prayers and tissues, radiant tears were looped to a tree. Caught in their light, a hope washed over me, small as the hope of a stumbling feet, but did not hold long enough to get me down. Rickshaws crowded the field, announced by tiny bells. The friend beside me, whose bread floated and bobbed, grew grim. They're full, I told them, but they always eat mine. That night, I told the man I loved most that he came from hell. It was also his birthday. We gulped lobster over a white tablecloth in a country where waves erase whole villages annually and don't even make it to our front page. Waiters forded the lulling currents of heat. Later, my mosquito net had holes. All night, I was pitching something, crumbs or crust, into the bottomless pool where the spaces between our words take root. He would forgive me tomorrow, but I wanted a mouth to rise up from the dark, a hand, any declarable body part, to swallow or say, this is water and that is land. That's the end. So yes, I think a lovely way to end today's reading, and I like the way that this is about her sort of throwing out a prayer out into the universe, or in this case, into the mouth of a turtle, and really hoping for the best. And on that note, I think for all of us, we hope for the best for the people in Palestine, what they're going through, for those in Ukraine, for those outside of Ukraine, Yemen. You know, there's so many active conflicts in the world, and yeah, thank you, Kat, for putting this together and allowing us to sort of talk about these things.
Can I say something, Kate?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, and maybe last of all, really, Raisa, you are amazing. Because there wasn't much contribution from the floor, but you just carried a way about the whole topic and the poet and your explanation in such a lovely way, which is really sort of made me feel like, I'm very lucky that I could attend this session. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Secondly, like, as I said, like people, when we read this, any literary work, or maybe artistic work, or maybe a creation, what we do, we always see or try to connect it from our own perspective. The connectivity is the most important thing. And with Naomi, like, with my story now, and with having this Chittagong, now we know that she stepped into my birthplace, my country, and I know the Bayajid Bustami, I know the turtle, and my parents are originally from Sylhet. So I am aware of there are some huge, big, enormous catfish in the near the shrine of Shah Jalal in Sylhet. And when you were reading, I was kind of, trying to see the connections. And when I came to England to visit in 1976, it was Trafalgar Square. There were hundreds and thousands of pigeons were flying, and we used to feed them. And there was like little kiosk that you could buy the pigeon food, and you hold it in your hand and you wait for them. And they are already well fed. I mean, they're not really bothered to eat, but you wait for them. So I feel like the way she was thinking of the turtle, she has her own explanation when it's going to open the mouth. And I just saw myself, I'm in the Trafalgar Square. Here I am, an immigrant, and really now I'm an immigrant. That time I was a visitor, and I thought, like, how do I get sort of the feel of the land that I'm visiting? This is something like all you have to do is to be curious, and you will find a way of connection. It all goes to the same direction, to one point. Like her first poem, it's about the different ways to pray. I'm a storyteller too, so there is a story. It's about it's a lovely church. And we know that in Britain, the churches has got stained glass windows. So the mother bee sent all the bees to the church and said that, end of the day, you tell me your experience. And they all went like zzz, and set into that stained glass window. And inside the window, inside the church, there's a praying was going on. The priest and what they're doing inside. And they saw it all, and they came back to Mother Bee, Queen Bee, and the bee asked, "What did you see?" So one of them said, "It was all blue, and I saw that." Another one was saying, "It was all red, and I saw that." And another one said, something green. And what it is, like, they also, from their own perspective, because there is this glass, but all ended up going in the same place. So different way of praying. We all are praying differently, but it is going to the same place. We hope that it would reach there.
Yeah.
So all 3 points, I kind of muddled it up. But what I'm saying, the name of the place Chittagong, just immediately I could connect it again, and I saw those turtle, and I thought her identity, like mine. I have a hyphenated identity. I'm Bangladeshi British, and I've got 2 languages. So my accent is different. Anyone can tell or smell the spice in there. And my I would say the language is tangled between 2 languages. My identity is as well. And once I used to feel like, this is quite challenging. Now that, you know, I had a long journey. I feel that I'm so grateful that I had experience of two wonderful languages, that I could play with it, I could juggle around. And when I met Naomi, and we all were aware, or we knew her identity, and we thought America is really trying to focus into that they are into diversity, and they want to promote like the diverse range of people or creative people are there in the country. Otherwise, during that time, she was very young, but she was chosen to travel to uh, Bangladesh and kind of mingle with us. And we tried to give her as best as we can the experience of Bangladesh and the experience of listening to Bangladeshi poetry in translation or sometimes without translation. I'll finish now. I want to say, Kate, it's really wonderful. Thank you for asking me to join. And thank you again, Raisa, and everyone. I could see Dia, Tanisha, and Momita. Yeah, all of you, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. It was lovely to hear. Yeah, I think that wraps it up from me, Kat. That's all I have for today. This was a
Thank you.
Go on.
No, it's been wonderful. I think there's nothing quite like poetry that it's such a balm, and it is that connecting factor across. You know, the conflicts are very different, and cultures are very different, but the similarities of it, like the experience of horrors and the experience of loss and displacement, that is common to everyone who's gone through it. I think, and I'm very happy with the works that you selected, and for me personally, they were really good to hear tonight. And thank you for guiding us through it. Sami Mappa, thank you for contributing, and I hope one day we can read your work. So I'll reach out, and maybe one day you can be an elder sister. Dia, Tanisha, Momita, thank you for being such quiet but engaged listeners. And Shoma, thank you for being my partner in this.
Thank you. It was actually really amazing to hear both of you, Shamima Appa and Raisha. So it was really nice, and I hope that we will meet anytime, anywhere. Please come to Goethe. We have lots of events for Sister Library. So whenever you have time, meet with us so we can discuss more and also learn more from you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a lovely experience. I'm glad we got to have this session. Thank you again, Kat, for having me, and Shamina for all those valuable contributions. Thank you. Yeah, this was a very good.
So so for people who do want to support Palestine, like what are the best ways? Maybe you could just quickly say, or maybe share some links with me in email, and then I can share with the people who are interested.
Yeah. I definitely have some resources that I think would be helpful to anyone who wants to learn more. There are also I can share some links on so sometimes it feels a bit complicated when you're living in Bangladesh or in a different part of the world, and you kind of wonder how you can participate. But there are actually loads of ways that you can contribute. And I will share some links, Kat, if you want to share them out with everyone, for anyone who's interested.
Yes, that'd be helpful.
But yeah, every little bit helps for sure.
Well, good night, Sister Library.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Take care.